Welcome to the Running for Real podcast, where each week we bring you a conversation designed to help you create positive change in your life, community, and planet. It's a collective of conversations about running, the climate emergency, and social justice. Running for Real is for the brave, for those with courage and vulnerability. United by our love of running, we're driving momentum towards some of the really tough challenges we're facing as humanity. So come join me, Tina Muir, and let's get started. Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 240 of the Running for Real podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I am, as always, excited you are here and looking forward to letting you get to know someone. If you have not already got to know her in episodes 33 and 99, I believe. Did actually just check that just before I recorded this, and yet I still forgot. 99 and 33, I believe, are the episodes of Rene Mcgregor, who is our guest today. I just adore this woman, and I think you are going to too. But before I tell you any more about her, I just want to let you know that Running Realized, if you have not already gone to check it out, we have another one coming in just a few days. Episode 3 will be coming out, and it is about the fact that we have never been more disconnected from ourselves. It is a really, really powerful one, and I am pretty excited to get you to hear it in a few weeks. Or in a few days, I should say. In the last few weeks, we have been loving hearing your thoughts on the one we released a few weeks ago on leadership, women in coaching, how we need to get things to change, the male-dominated coaching world. It was a really impactful one, and I love hearing that you are enjoying it too. So if you haven't already checked out Running Realized, you can go do that. And yes, so today we have Rene Mcgregor on the show. She has been on twice before. She is one of my favorite dietitians. She is the co-founder of Train Brave. She is the author of Orthorexia, and just one of my favorite people to ask questions to about handling our relationship to food. She has such a good perspective on things. And she's become a really close friend of mine, and I really think you're going to enjoy getting to know her if you have not already. Now, today was a bit more of a relaxed episode. As I said, we are friends, and so I basically just had a few notes of things I wanted to bring up, and we did talk about them. We didn't get to all of them, and I didn't have many. But we did go into a lot, and a lot of it is about relationship to food, but it is also just about mental health and working through this time and what we are going through and how we need to treat ourselves. And so I do want to give maybe a trigger warning for anyone who is working through an eating disorder. We do talk about eating disorders, but this is applicable to, I would say, almost everyone listening, because we have all gone through struggles. We have all gone through these changes, and Rene has such a good perspective on things, particularly when it comes to how to speak in front of others. And yeah, I just really enjoy her perspective. So before I ramble on any longer, we are just going to take a moment to thank one of our sponsors. I'll be right to the episode with Rene Mcgregor. Thank you to Momentous for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. I am really thankful to be working with this company, and I keep teasing to you, but I still can't say anything just yet. But there is some really exciting changes that they are making to really make a big reduction in the carbon footprint. I can't really say much more than that at this point, but I feel really, really good about the direction the company is going in. And I just feel like they care. So I'm excited to share more about that sometime soon. Now, I've mentioned each of the products that I use through this podcast, and I am actually testing out one of the new ones, which is Brain Drive, which is to kind of optimize your thinking as I struggle to think, optimize your focus. And it's something that I just want to make sure that I give some time before I speak out about. But so far, I've really been enjoying it and finding it very helpful when I have my little bursts of time where I can do work in the mornings. And so that's been something really helpful. I have mentioned before, and I'll mention it again, I have really been enjoying the Elite Sleep. I have had a few nights where I could tell I was flustered and unable to sleep, and when I have taken that before bed, I have found it to really help me to settle my mind and to drift off to sleep, even when there is a lot on my mind, and I've never really found that before, especially when I've tried to just use melatonin on my own. So I definitely am enjoying the Momentous Elite Sleep. And also, I have been really trying out the creatine lately. Not all the time. I'm not trying to bulk myself up, but it's just been an enjoyable thing that I can use. And if you are an older athlete, that is something that's really going to help your body with some of the things that occur with aging. That is, by taking additional creatine, it's going to help your body to balance out the changes that your body is going to be going through losing that muscle mass that's going to happen over time. So you can get 20% off your order at livemomentous.com. That's livemomentous.com. By using code TINA, you can get 20% off your order. Go check them out. They've got lots of other products on there you can go check out. And thank you so much to Momentous. Rene, my friend, I am excited to welcome you back for a third time. You reach a very small group of people who have been on my podcast 3 times. So welcome back, and thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's always lovely to see you and speak to you. And 3 times. Good, right?
I know it's good though, because it's been, as we were just looking up before we started recording, it's been 2 years since we last recorded. And so a lot has changed since early 2019. But then also a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today are things that have always been there, but maybe are exaggerated or heightened or have gone from a low level simmer to now boiling over. So they're things that we need to address. So I think this is good in many ways. So firstly, for the listeners, January 2019, tell me, what have you been up to since or in the last few years? And maybe for those who don't know you, what do you do in your day-to-day life?
Okay, so I'm a sports dietitian, but I specifically, I suppose, specialize in the area of eating disorders, sort of dysfunctional relationships with food and training. That's not to say I don't work with sports performance, because I do, but I do have a specialist interest in those difficult relationships that people can develop through food and exercise. And oh gosh, over 2 years, it's nuts, isn't it? 2 years is, in some way, 1 year sort of feels irrelevant because we've been in this global pandemic, and I can't believe it's pretty much almost a year now since we in the UK were put in lockdown. It was the 23rd of March it was. So it's like, wow, a year's gone. But I guess, what have I been up to? I have been, I've been doing what I do, which is trying to educate, raise awareness about the potential dangers, in terms of under-eating, over-exercising, what that can do for you, trying to get people to understand what REDS is, that's relative energy deficiency in sport. I started a podcast last year, which I think, people have really taken to, talking all things REDS, all things eating disorders, and general mental health and female health. So that's been really well received. We've grown. So it used to just be me who dealt with everybody, and now I have a fast-growing team. There's now 11 of us, which is quite nuts. So I run a team of 11, and even when I say that out loud to you, I'm like, how did that happen? It's like I can't quite get my head around it, but it's great. It's great because what it means is that we can offer so much more support to people, and I'm not spread so thinly, which means that I can do more education.
Well, I'd say maybe.
Well, yeah, I'm still very spread quite thinly, but I just think I'm one of those people that's going to keep on taking more, So, but I guess, fundamentally, it's just been more of the same. It's all been about just raising awareness, supporting people, educating people, helping people, this whole area of eating disorders, disordered eating, overtraining, it concerns me so much because it's so prevalent, more prevalent than I think anybody realizes. And I just think people don't even, it's so easy, as you found in your, in your career, it's so easy to disguise it, especially if you're doing a lot of training. It's so easy to kind of sweep it under the carpet and think, no, it's just because I'm an athlete, or it's just because I'm really active, or it's just because I'm really busy. And so, yeah, I guess that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years.
And a lot of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you definitely have been doing a ton, and really have been just, you said about the education piece, and I can only imagine the amount of people that you've helped over the years. I've had actually many people, I don't know if I've told you this, but many people have reached out to me who have said, oh, I've worked with Rene, I just adore her, and she's been really helpful. So that's been really cool for me to see and feel so much pride for you. And you and I have become good friends. We send messages back and forth every few weeks, little voice memos, which many people know I'm a big fan of. But I would love for you to go through, you're the perfect person for me to go through this with, because it's very casual, conversational. But what are some of the things that you have noticed over the last year that, as I mentioned earlier, maybe there were things that were simmering within a lot of people, things that were maybe in the back of their mind that have come to the forefront? What are some of the things, just from your experience, that has come up in this intense situation that we have been in through the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, we have never been busier, which is really sad, in the sense that, what the pandemic has done is that, especially initially, it created so much fear and so much threat, and so much uncertainty. And, dysfunctional relationships with food, body image, exercise, they're often born from this place of uncertainty because, you tend to be an individual that generally struggles with your sense of worth, and you have this kind of need to prove yourself all the time. And maybe you're trying to attain worth through body image, through training achievements, or, sports achievements, or even through how you eat. But uncertainty is one of the stumbling blocks. So like whenever I work with individuals, the things that people always talk about is, oh, but I can't eat that because X will happen. And I'm like, well, how do you know that? I don't, but it will. And it's like, but you don't know that. And it's that uncertainty to jump into that space of the unknown. And, to be fair, humans generally are not very good with the I don't know. Human brains don't cope with it very well at all. And we are, we're hardwired to run away from threat or fear. So if you don't know something, potentially there's a big possibility that something bad will happen. And so you want to run away from that. And what we tend to do is then create these like definitive negatives. So, an example I often use is a lot of people feel they have to walk their 10,000 steps a day, because if they don't, then somehow they won't be healthy, or they won't be fit, or they'll lose their fitness, is what they think. And I'm like, well, how do you know? How do you know that will happen? And they're like, but I do know. But of course they don't know. It's just that that's what they have held on to, because it's much easier to hold on to the, if I don't do it, something bad will happen, because there's something quite permanent about that, which is a lot easier for our brain to get our head over. Whereas if we sit in the I don't know, could go either way, and that's quite frightening. So what the pandemic did was create all this uncertainty about, well, what's going to happen? When will I see my loved ones again? When will I go back to work? Will I ever go back to school? Will I ever see anybody again? Will life ever go back to normal? Like, these were the questions that so many of us were asking ourselves. And at the same time, everybody's routines got changed, like everything. So these individuals probably who maybe hadn't realized that they were fixated on their body image, or had problems with food and exercise, suddenly when the gym's shut, or when, their workspaces or their uni spaces or whatever closed and everybody had to work from home, but you couldn't use public transport. You couldn't move around freely anymore. Like we lost everything to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm.
People didn't know how to cope because there was this kind of like, I remember in that first month last year, the messages I was getting through on Instagram, like, I don't know what to do. I can't go to the gym. I'm really worried. My body's going to change. You know, I don't know how to cope with this. I'm just walking like for 4 hours a day now. And it was nuts. Like, honestly, it was absolutely nuts, the messages I was getting. And I kind of didn't know how to hold all these people. Like it was because at the same time, I was also going through a global pandemic.
Yeah.
And I was like trying to get my own head around the fact that, okay, my teenage daughters who've got really important exams are at home. My business, like my clinics had to shut down. Can we do video stuff? Is it going to work? And also, like, I can't see my friends, and I'm a single parent, so I can't see anyone. And I'm here with my, with my 15-year-old daughter, and that's it. Like, how do I get my head around that? And so I found it really fascinating because, it was interesting as the months sort of unfolded, you started to notice that people who have maybe experienced quite a lot of adversity in their past were coping a little bit better because actually it's like, okay, well, I've been through a lot of rubbish before and I've got through it. So you know what, we'll get through this. But people who had never, ever had any adversity in their life, so maybe some of the younger generation had never experienced anything really difficult, were just not coping. And as I said, like, humans are hardwired to move away from difficult circumstances and difficult emotions. And so this is what so many people ended up doing. They ended up fixating on things like food and exercise and body image because these are methods of escapism. They're a way of denying those uncomfortable feelings of not knowing, those uncomfortable feelings of not feeling good enough, those uncomfortable feelings of, potential judgment. And so what people do is they pour it into something they can physically mold. So we can do something with exercise. We can do something with food. We can do something with our body image. It's like a physical thing. We can do something is we can mold it, contain it, control it, whatever you want to call it. But what we can't do is that with our emotions, especially if we don't understand our emotions. We just understand that something's not right, but we can't work out what that is. So I think this is why, like, we've seen this massive rise. I mean, I know in the UK, the head of the British Psychiatry, the College of Psychiatry, has called it a tsunami of increase in eating disorders. Like, I think there's like been ridiculous number of over 60% increase in the number of people suffering with eating disorders in this last 12 months. That's nuts. Like, that is incredible. And that's just the people that are coming forward. There's going to be a lot more people hiding who don't want to admit they've got a problem because, that's also the sad thing about an eating disorder is that, one, there's a lot of stigma, but two, because it provides you with this false sense of security, you feel safe. It's a false safety, but you do feel safe. And so you don't always want to change it. So there's going to be a lot of people out there who are not coming forward. And that scares me even more, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not surprising. And can you just clarify, I know we've done this in previous episodes, but for someone who maybe hasn't listened to those yet, when you say about eating disorders, what do you mean there? Because I think as much as I've mentioned this with guests on multiple podcasts, people are still going to come to mind of this thin, maybe 20-year-old white woman who is, really, really visibly emaciated. I always nearly say emancipated, emaciated. But tell us, what do you mean? What does that mean to you and in the clinical side of things?
Okay, so there's a bit of a range. So firstly, an eating disorder is not, it's not just a teenage white, teenaged, privileged disorder, which is often what people think. It is, it can affect anybody, any race, any gender, any age. And we definitely see a real mix in our clinic. It's also not the classic, I think everybody sort of knows and hears about anorexia, which is very much that, keeping your body at a very underweight place because there's this irrational and intense fear of gaining weight and being a normal body weight. And that is an illness without a doubt. And that is the one that probably most people are more familiar with. But there's also bulimia, where people are purging. Now, purging doesn't, again, have to be just vomiting. It could be that you're over-exercising. It could be you're taking laxatives. So there's bulimia. There's also binge eating disorder. And we've seen a huge rise in binge eating disorder in the pandemic. Again, a way of coping. The thing about binge eating disorder is that people can identify that they need something. They identify there's an emotion that needs to be met, but they don't know how to meet it. And so they end up binging as a way of either trying to provide themselves with comfort or as a way of trying to push their feelings down. But then there's this incredible guilt and shame that comes alongside it. And so you end up almost getting set up in this binge restrict cycle, because if you binge, you then feel remorseful, then you end up restricting, and then you go back into a binge because your body physiologically will demand food, so there's binge eating disorder. And then you have a whole, I suppose, spectrum that is probably more known as disordered eating or orthorexia. And this is very much kind of connected with the whole wellness industry and, eating in certain ways. And orthorexia specifically is the obsession with eating correctly, with eating purely. And so it's not always a fixation on your body image. It's more about health and healthism, as I like to call it. This absolute need to feel like you're doing everything in your power to be the healthiest version of yourself, which is fine, except that often they take it to an extreme where it then starts to create social isolation and anxiety. And actually you can become quite restrictive and rigid with your eating rules. And then we have kind of, whether you want to call it a subsection or whatever, we have exercise dependency, we have, athletic, we have exercise addiction. There's also the REDS. They're all kind of interchangeable in the sense that REDS is relative energy deficiency in sport. So it's that kind of not putting enough energy into the body for the amount of work that your body needs to do, and work being the training you do, but also all your biological functions. Now, this can be unintentional, you might just not realize it, but often it's usually intentional in that people are consciously restricting their intake and consciously probably overtraining, not resting enough. And so this then creates this massive deficit. Now, these individuals don't always present as super skinny. You might not actually lose much weight at all, because what happens is when you have these big deficits, what the body does is it goes into compensatory behaviors. So it actually starts to kind of shut down your biological processes. It shuts down your metabolic rate to try and keep you alive, to be able to prioritize that movement that, the body is being asked to do. But the individuals become physiologically quite unwell because, their periods in women, their periods might stop. In guys, the testosterone might drop. And these then have bigger ramifications in terms of your bone health and your mood and your digestive health and your cardiovascular health. So it's such a big range. This is why I tend to just call it dysfunctional relationships with food and exercise, because I think generally speaking, probably people interchange a little bit. But I think the thing to kind of be aware of is that it's never really about food or exercise or body image. It's usually a method of coping. It's usually about the relationship with self and that struggle with self and that constant need to prove yourself that you're enough. And you go in search of the answers through food and exercise and body image.
Yes. Thank you so much. With that, for someone who's thinking, well, didn't you just list every single person by going through that range. Like, tell us about, I mean, you mentioned there about the self-worth and, just believing you are enough. And I would imagine most people listening do, whether you accept it and kind of allow yourself to recognize that you do feel that way. I would imagine most of us do experience that, feeling like we are not good enough, or feeling that you mess up all the time, or you are a mistake with what you do and you're constantly screwing up. Or tell us about, for someone who's skeptical there and just saying, oh, aren't we all just normal? Like, yeah, there's some people who have extremes, but the disordered eating or the dysfunctional relationship, isn't that just life?
I think it's a really good question. I think like, so fundamentally, I think one of the biggest issues we have is that modern society creates a sense of inadequacy and unworthiness in all of us. So yes. None of us are born with no self-esteem. We're all born with good self-esteem and good self-assurance. But then whatever happens to you in those early development years, and then through your childhood, and then into your teenage years and adulthood, and the way you interpret and the way you experience life will start to shape the kind of person you are. So what I mean by that is, when we think about youngsters, like say, 3-year-olds, 2-3-year-olds, and you, as a parent, maybe you're out with them at a cafe or whatever, and your child is kind of, what they do, as you know, with your little ones, they will try and test the water, and they will try and run away, and they might try and move further and further and further away. Now, some parents will get quite anxious about that, and potentially will try and bring them back in and kind of, try and keep them safe, which is completely understandable. But other parents are much more relaxed about it and kind of provide that style of parenting that helps that child know that they are safe. They can go and explore and be curious, but they can come back and be safe, if that makes sense. So you learn that you need to go and be curious about the world, but sometimes the world doesn't always work out for you. But actually, there's that reassurance that it's okay. You're gonna be okay. You can look after yourself, or there's someone here at the moment as you're younger to look after yourself. So if you have grown up in an environment where maybe you haven't had that constant reassurance, and it's not always about your parenting, it's sometimes about the guardians, sometimes about your siblings, sometimes about your peers, but you haven't grown up with that constant reassurance that you are okay as you are, and you find yourself becoming maybe more and more of that sort of perfectionist mindset where you feel the need to prove yourself. In what I mean by that is that there's this constant need for acceptance and approval because you haven't learned how to accept yourself unconditionally. Like we all know, nobody is perfect and everybody has icky bits about them that maybe you're not massively comfortable with. But by not being comfortable with those bits, you become a human that only accepts yourself conditionally, not unconditionally. And so what that does, it sets you up to fail because it's like, well, I'm only going to be good enough if I do X or if I do Y or if I look a certain way or if I, have the most amazing house or whatever it might be. And I guess this is where modern society feeds in, right? Because modern society, especially now, the way we live with social media and, kind of having constant images of what ideals are. And when I talk about ideals, I don't just mean body image. I mean just ideals of how we should live. There are so many rules, it feels like, about what we should be doing and how we should live. And only when you do that, you're going to be accepted. So you can imagine if you're then that individual that's not quite sure about yourself anyway, and then you've got all this information coming your way, what our brain does is it creates thoughts and feelings and emotions through the sound bites that are going on around us. So if you are somebody that spends a lot of time on social media, you're going to be taking all that image, all that information, and it's going to be going around your brain. And then the neurochemistry in the brain starts to create like thoughts and beliefs about this. And so then you start to kind of believe that, oh, well, I'll only be accepted if I look like that, because that's what everybody on Instagram looks like. And that's why they're so successful. You can start to see how it starts to feed into that mindset. And the more you then repeat that, the more you tell yourself that's the case, the more that becomes your truth and your reality. So this is why then people never feel good enough, because they are constantly being bombarded with messages that tell us that we're not good enough. And we get very little information telling us it's okay if you fuck up. It's okay. It's fine if you mess up. It's fine if you get it wrong, because the thing that the unconditional acceptance does is it teaches you how to turn up for yourself. It teaches you to know that actually, if you get rejected, if you get criticized, if someone judges you, you know what? That's on them, because you're there to support you, and you will either learn from that situation, or you can turn up for yourself and provide yourself with the comfort and the reassurance and the care that you need. And I don't think there are many humans that know how to do that very well in modern society. And I think this is why we have become a society where disordered eating, disordered relationships with exercise are so rife.
Thank you to Insidetracker for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. Do you want to run further and faster and recover quicker and easier? Do you need to feel healthier than you've ever felt before? You need to make a change, and that is what Insidetracker is all about. Founded by leading scientists in aging, genetics, and biometric data from MIT, Tufts, and Harvard, Insidetracker is a personalized health and wellness platform like no other. So what is their secret? Well, first, Insidetracker uses its patented algorithm to analyze your body's data and offer you a clearer picture than you've ever had before of what's going on inside you. Then, Insidetracker provides you with concrete, science-backed, trackable action plan for reaching your performance goals and being your healthy best. You want to hear the great part? Insidetracker is offering my listeners 25% off. Yes, 25% off discount to their entire store. All of the options you can look at there. You can go to insidetracker.com/Tina, because change is an inside job.
The thing that the unconditional acceptance does is it teaches you how to turn up for yourself. It teaches you to know that actually, if you get rejected, if you get criticized, if someone judges you, you know what? That's on them, because you're there to support you, and you will either learn from that situation, or you can turn up for yourself and provide yourself with the comfort and the reassurance and the care that you need. And I don't think there are many humans that know how to do that very well in modern society. And I think this is why we have become a society where disordered eating, disordered relationships with exercise are so rife.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for explaining that. That was, so much to unpack and think about it from that. And for someone who is maybe hearing this and thinking, okay, yeah, I definitely, I can sense that I do use maybe food or exercise to deal with some emotions that I'm having. And you talked there about 2-3-year-olds, or just like the effect of childhood. How can we get in touch with that little girl or little boy inside of us who maybe is still feeling that way? Because from what I've learned, from what I've read, that little person inside of us is still in there, and they still, even to this day, need that reassurance, that, saying to ourselves, like we've talked about before, self-care, self-love, being kind to yourself. We still need that. So how could someone go about figuring out maybe some of the things that they were or did pick up during childhood that now they would like to change and maybe show that small person inside of us all that they are enough, they are worthy?
Such a great question. I mean, I think I'm not the expert on this. I think we need to definitely turn to people like Tara Brach or Susan David or Brené Brown. Like they're the experts on this whole thing. And obviously I learn a lot from reading their stuff and listening to their podcasts. And but I think like one thing I realized very, not recently, but in recent years, and I know, Tina, you know my story, but not everybody does. And so I got divorced 4.5 years ago, and it was a really, really tricky time. And life was really not very nice and easy, and it was very chaotic and messy. And I ended up doing a lot of work on myself, because one of the questions I kept asking myself was, where did I go wrong? Like what can I learn from the fact that my marriage broke down? And we were together a very long time. We were together over 16 years. So it wasn't like, it was my whole adult life that I was with this person. And I knew that I didn't want to, it wasn't about blaming myself. And I knew it wasn't about seeing it as a failure. And something that I've always learnt is it's important to try and see, and this is not about being positive, but it's important to kind of think about how you think about every situation. So instead of kind of like, what did I do wrong? I asked myself the question, what did I go through this for? Because what that does is it starts to help you to see that there's a learning point in it. So instead of being the victim that sits there and goes, oh my God, why has this happened to me? What is wrong with me? That kind of whole, which then creates that narrative, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. I started to think, okay, what did I go through this for? And actually it became more and more easy to unpack the fact that, there were lots of things that were wrong in that relationship. And that's not to say that, we're actually really good friends now. 4.5 years later, we're good friends and we can co-parent and it's great, but it's taken a lot of work on both our parts to get to that point. So I think why I'm talking about this is that in those early few years, what I noticed was I was always a mess. I was always quite stressed and always really anxious because I'd never lived on my own as an adult. I'd always had my husband. And suddenly I was faced with buying a house, creating a home, dealing with my car, dealing with things that fell apart in the house, things that you do as a partnership generally when you're with someone. And I realized that I was panicking all the time. Like I was worried about, oh my God, what if I drive down the motorway and the wheel falls off? Like irrational fears, but I was really stressed about it, and it would create huge amounts of anxiety. And as I decided I needed to get some support and help on this. And that was exactly what we did. And what I was made to realize was that it was my younger version of myself that was really anxious and stressed because I'd had a very difficult childhood and had never really resolved that. And so the younger version was like, I can't cope, I can't handle this, and wouldn't let me see that actually Rene Mcgregor is a very capable, resourceful and resilient woman. And
yes, you are.
But I almost couldn't see that because I went into panic mode so much. And there's this, Tara Brach talks about this whole aspect of becoming a spiritual parent to yourself. So if you've never had that unconditional acceptance or love as a child, for whatever reason, there's no reason why you can't develop that for yourself, but you have to turn up and be that spiritual parent for yourself. And I suppose the way I learned it was, and yes, maybe I'm more fortunate than others because I am a mother and I have children, but I used to think, if the girls presented me with this problem, how would I help them cope? And by doing that, I ended up starting to be my own parent. And that's how I started to kind of tame that very fearful child that was still within me. And now it's really interesting because, the more you practice something, the more it becomes your learned behavior. And now it's interesting that when I get stressed out or when I notice that I'm anxious or whatever it might be, instead of that I can't cope, the immediate question that comes into my head is, what do you need? What is it that you need right now? And I think that's really interesting for me, because that was always about I can't cope. And now it's like, what do you need? And realizing that often our emotions are trying to tell us something. I think a lot of people see emotions as fact, as a directive, like, I feel sad, so you become sadness. But actually what our emotions are, feelings are, they are data, right? They're telling us, again, Brené Brown uses that term, emotions are data, not directive. And it's very much that, is that they're trying to tell us something. So they're very important, but that doesn't mean that they're factual. And I see this so often when people sort of talk about their body image, for example. They'll say, I feel big, or I feel uncomfortable, or I feel unattractive, or whatever it might be. And I say to them, well, what is the description of your body image? And these are the things they'll say to me. And I'm like, but that's not the description of your body image, because the description of your body image is simply that, I'm 5'2", dark hair, dark skinned. That's the description of your body image. That's it. There's no emotion attached to it, but we add emotion to it, and then we become that emotion. And so one of the things that we have to learn to do is start to separate ourselves from our emotions. So to provide that kind of space, Viktor Frankl has that amazing quote about between stimulus and response, there's a space, and within that space is where we grow and learn. That amazing quote that he talks about. And so, one thing I always try and teach the people I work with is when they say, I am sad or I am lonely, then I ask them to say, okay, now say that to me and create some space. So say that to me in a way of saying, I am noticing that I am sad, or I am noticing that I am lonely. And when I get them to do that, I say, okay, so how does that feel different? And they're like, oh, I don't feel quite as heavy. I don't feel quite as like it's me. I've created the space. So I said, yeah, exactly. So this emotion is happening to you. You are not the emotion. And that's really important to get people to realize. Like, even if it's like, I feel guilty, or I feel bigger, or whatever it is, it's realizing that it's an emotion that is happening. It doesn't mean it is. And that's so important. And then you can start to be more curious and explorative with that emotion. So if you notice that you feel lonely, what does that say? And what that tells us is that maybe you value connection, and that's one of the things that the pandemic has made so difficult, is that we haven't been able to connect in the way that we normally connect. And so maybe we need to think about different ways in which we can connect to ensure that we can still meet that need. So often our emotions are trying to help us to go back to our need or go back to our values. And, I think as humans, we've lost sight of that. Like we just kind of carry on, don't we? We just keep going, and we don't ever stop and go, what do I need right now?
Such a good question to ask yourself, and a simple way to do it. It's not, let me write down, 10 things that I need to change about myself right now, or 5 ways I could look after myself. It's just a simple question. What do I need? And just giving you, I think one important thing I want to just highlight is giving yourself the space to answer that. And it may take 30 seconds, a minute of silence, but it will come through. We're not so good at that part either, of giving ourselves the space and the time to do that. Now, I would love to know, do you see a difference generationally with how people tend to approach what is going on? I mean, from what I see, that boomer generation really struggles with sharing vulnerability of how they're feeling, to accessing those feelings. And it's not necessarily even that they're still obviously happening. Of course they are, these emotions, these feelings, but just maybe having a really hard time accessing them or speaking them out. Do you see that generationally? So I see them as that way, and then this young generation coming through is very, very sensitive, very able to say I'm feeling anxiety, able to speak about things. And then obviously that group, you and I falling into the middle there, are somewhat of a mix. So do you see anything like that, or am I just kind of trying to put people in boxes?
No, you're right. And I think it's interesting because there's definitely a misconception about what vulnerability is. And actually I see that across all ages, but I see it very much in the people I work with. Like this real fear to be vulnerable because somehow it suggests you're weak. And yet, again, I go back to, the wise words of Brené Brown in terms of vulnerability. I mean, vulnerability is actually a strength, right? Because vulnerability is showing up and putting yourself out there completely authentically without knowing what the outcome is. So we go back to that whole sense of uncertainty that we started with at the beginning of this conversation. It's being able to sit in that space of the unknown, but knowing that whatever happens, you can turn up for yourself. And the majority of people I work with, that's the bit they don't always join up. And that's the bit they don't always understand that they have to do. They're so focused on, I need to get my nutrition right. I need to get my training right. I need to get my body right, that they don't realize that it's actually about that much more deep rooted aspect of who they are. But you're right. Definitely I couldn't say it. From a generation point of view, the boomers very much have this sort of stiff upper lip, and we've been through quite a lot of adversity and hardship. A lot of them will have been through kind of economic crashes and goodness knows what else, and have probably had to deal with really quite difficult circumstances and have somehow got through it. And of course that does make you more resilient. You might not always realize that you're more resilient, but it does make you more resilient because you have been through hardship, and that's quite, it's a difficult one to navigate. But equally, don't always realize that you don't just have to accept it. You can actually, it's okay. Like, especially through the pandemic, I've been saying to people, it's okay to think that life's a bit rubbish at the moment, because it really is. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing we can do about that. That's not you complaining. It's just accepting that life really is quite hard right now. Now, that doesn't mean it'll always stay that way, but right this minute, life is hard. But acknowledging that doesn't mean we're necessarily going to have an answer for it. But at least we've acknowledged that life's hard, and that's okay because we're human and we're allowed to feel that emotion. We don't have to just get on with it all. We don't have to just be okay with it all. Mm-hmm. And then, you're right. The younger generation definitely kind of, I don't know, is it the millennials? Is that what they call them? Or even younger, still Generation Z? I don't know. But,
I don't actually know.
The younger versions definitely seem to be very in touch with their emotions, but don't really understand them, which I think is what's interesting. And that's not because nobody's taught them. It's just that actually, I think it just takes a certain level of life experience and maturity to understand them to a certain degree. And I think, when I think about where I'm at, even if someone had told me all this stuff when I was 25, I probably still wouldn't really understand it. Mm-hmm. I sometimes sit at home when I finally do get to sit down on the sofa and not think about clients. I sometimes do sit and go, I wish I'd known that, you have the power over your thoughts, or that you, it's important to tune into your emotions and work out that they are trying to tell you something. I wish I'd known that at 25. And then I go, would I have got it?
Yeah, would you have listened?
Not.
Yeah,
exactly.
Someone probably did tell you that at some point, and me too. Someone probably did say that to us when I wonder that as well.
Exactly. And it's interesting when you work with individuals of that age group and you're trying to explain it to them, and they do get it. They do get it. But it is interesting to know, because at the end of the day, we all have to make mistakes, right, to grow. Mm-hmm. So even if you can help somebody to understand it, they still have to go through those adversities. They still have to go through those difficult circumstances to put it into practice and still learn and grow from it. But I guess by helping people to understand that, almost see it as a bit of a toolkit on how to navigate life, maybe you give them some coping skills that don't involve beating themselves up and punishing themselves in the process. I guess that's what I always try and hope.
Thank you to Beam for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. I am excited to introduce you to Beam, and this is a product I've been testing out over the last few months. As you know, I really pride myself on checking things out. I've been going back and forth with Beam for many months now about whether this was going to be a good fit, just checking that we were on the same page, and I wanted to give it a chance because I really need to try things out before I recommend them. So I want to tell you about their Elevate products today, which are their hydration products. And as we are coming into summer, I don't know about you, but I'm not the best at getting my liquids in during any time of the year, getting water in, but I'm definitely not very good at getting in electrolytes during those summer months when it gets warm. And that is why I was really excited about Beam Elevate products. This is this hydrating electrolyte and powder. And I want to tell you about the performance one first, which is this energy powder. It's formulated with beetroot, green coffee bean, and citrulline. It tastes like it's a watermelon flavor, which I'm not usually a fan of watermelon, but I really like the taste of these Beam products. And I'll tell you about another flavor in a minute that I like, which I didn't expect to. It is great to just throw in any drink. It's going to give you this electrolyte blend. It's going to give you vitamin B and that green coffee extract. It's just great for when you're going out for a run and you really want to make the most of your run, which I have to definitely be effective with my time, be efficient with my time. And then they have another one called Recovery, which gives you that electrolyte blend. Also has branch chain amino acids and non-GMO collagen peptides. It comes in a lemon flavor. And again, I'm not normally a lemon fan, but I love the flavor of this so much so that when I first tried these products, I reached out to the two guys I work with and I said, I love the flavor of this because I wasn't expecting to at all. This is going to help you support your joint and muscle health and just be good with recovery. And then finally, they have a product called Elevate Balance, which is going to be a hydrating electrolyte powder formulated with prebiotics and probiotics to support a healthy microbiome. This flavor comes in mixed berries, and I've talked way too much, as I always do. So it is time for me to go tell you where you can check out more. You can go to beamtlc.com and use code TINA for 15% off your order. That's beamtlc.com for 15% off your order. Go check out these Elevate hydration products. They are fantastic, and I can't wait to hear what you think.
Because at the end of the day, we all have to make mistakes, right, to grow. Mm-hmm. So even if you can help somebody to understand it, they still have to go through those adversities. They still have to go through those difficult circumstances to put it into practice and still learn and grow from it. But I guess by helping people to understand that, almost see it as a bit of a toolkit on how to navigate life, maybe you give them some coping skills that don't involve beating themselves up and punishing themselves in the process. I guess that's what I always try and hope.
Yeah. I mean, from what I see of you do, you definitely are giving people those tools as best you can in an effective way. And okay, let's go to the real extreme. You said, I don't know, a little while ago about, you mentioned 2 to 3 year olds and, as Bailey is 3 and Chloe is coming up on a year, I am very much keeping in my mind the fact that I have these 2 little girls that I want to raise them with a healthy relationship with food. I want to help them I want to help cling on to, like you said, that sense of self-esteem, confidence that they have right now. And I know that they're never going to cling on to it. But let's talk about, it doesn't have to be for people who don't have kids. It doesn't have to be a parent. It could be someone, a niece, a nephew, some other child you have in your life, a godchild or something. How can we bring up the next generation to maybe not have to work through as many of the things that we've just talked about here? Or do you think that there's always going to be that element of we have to figure it out ourselves, and the only way we figure it out ourselves is by going through lots of periods of I don't believe in myself, that lack of confidence, a lot of the maybe negative things we've talked about so far. Like, what is the best advice you could give for raising children into young people, into adults, with as giving them a good relationship with food?
I guess I totally think you can be a really well-rounded and individual that doesn't have these. And I think everybody will have the odd day of lack of confidence and self-doubt, but I definitely think you can be an individual that doesn't feel it day in, day out, to the point where it then basically sets you up to fail every day. I 100% think that you can be a well-rounded and grounded individual without a doubt. And I guess, like, I'm not an expert in terms of like developmental stages and parenting and things, but I think from my own experience, I've now got an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old, and they are both very well-adjusted young women, and they've been through the fact that their parents' marriage broke down, and life hasn't always been easy, and they've both experienced, to a certain degree, an element of injustice because they're mixed-race kids, and so there has been difficult scenarios for them to handle as youngsters, because people haven't always accepted them because of the color of their skin, and I hate saying that in 2021, but it's true. So they've both had difficult circumstances to go through. But I guess the one thing that I've always tried to do for both of them is to explain to them that they are enough just as they are. Like, we've never focused on the fact that you're made attractive by your body, or that, that you need to, like, I've never had put any expectation on my kids. I've never said, oh, I'm only, I've never given that feeling of you're only going to be loved if you do well at school. Because,
can I pause you there? Do you say the other side of it? Like, do you say, you're perfect just as you are, or I love you just for you are, you don't need to do you say any of the opposite of that, or do you just make it clear through your actions that by almost not bringing it up?
I guess, yeah.
You get what I mean?
I'm always like one of my daughters is struggling a lot with anxiety at the moment, and in recent weeks she's gone through quite a tough time, but then, and this is all to do with the pandemic and school and everything else, and we've managed to get her through it. And last night, for example, I sat on her bed and I was like, do you know what? I'm so proud of you, because I know it's still really tough for you. I know that anxiety doesn't disappear, and I get that you're still struggling, but I'm really proud of the fact that you are turning up for yourself and you're trying to make, little steps towards helping yourself. So I guess what I've done there is made her realize that she has taken the initiative to look after herself, and she's the one who's turning up for herself. She's not dependent on others to make her feel better. She's really owning it, but also acknowledging that I still know she's struggling and I'm here for you. It's that kind of being able to give them that reassurance that I'm always here. Whatever happens, you're never going to be a disappointment to me, because, even when things aren't easy, like even when I've had to pick them up from parties and they are absolutely obliterated, because that's a rite of passage as a teenager, and they've thrown up in the back of my car, and I've never shown them disappointment. I've always just kind of gone, do you know what, I'm here. And I suppose I've tried to give them that unconditional support, that I'm always here for them. So they have learned that there's nothing they can do that means that they're not good enough. Does that make sense? Like, that's kind of, and in terms of like physical, we it's interesting. We rarely talk about our bodies or whatever. We've always just got on with it. And, the girls know mum likes to run and mum runs. But again, I've never put that pressure on them. But I guess they've seen me, they've seen me run, and they understand that a healthy life is one where you stay active and you eat well. But again, there's never, we don't have any rules about food. You know, we eat desserts, we drink wine, we go out for dinner, we have puddings. Like there's nothing that's ever off limits in our house. And so I think in some ways, because of that, they're very well adjusted around food, because they kind of go, well, today I really need a salad, but I also really want ice cream, you know, and it's not a problem. Like they'll just do what feels natural for them. So I guess what I've been able to do for them is help them to realize what their needs are, which took me 40 years to work out what my needs were, you know. So I think, like, I guess this is just my own experience of being a parent. I'm not saying I've done it right, and I'm not saying I've got it right, but I think helping children to manage expectation is definitely an important one. And what I mean by that is, like, so my older daughter is just about to go to uni in September, October. And, you know, a few weeks ago we were talking about it, and she's like, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. And I was like, Maya, rein it in, right? It's great to have aspirations, but remember that life doesn't always plan out the way we want it to. Now, that's not because you're not good enough. That's not because you're not doing anything right. It's just life throws curveballs. So have those aspirations, but you know what? Also realize that if that path doesn't open up, it doesn't matter, because there'll be another one around the corner that will. And I guess it's that sort of, it's being able to help children to realize that you don't fail as such, but you just learn and grow. And for everything that doesn't work out, something else will. And it's being able to see the opportunity. And I guess maybe it's that ability to help them navigate that space of I don't know, you know, because that uncertainty for my girls is never seen as an anxiety. It's actually seen as a potential opportunity all the time. And I think that's something that is now inbuilt in them, because that's what they've learned. And so if they don't know something, they don't sit there worrying about it. They're just like, okay, well, we'll handle it when we get to it, because that's what we've taught them.
Yes.
I don't know to answer your question.
No, it does. It actually is a better answer in many ways to what is helpful, and not just with, you know, that's kids across the board, but that's also for ourselves, advice that we can take on within our own lives. So no, I do appreciate that. But I am going to make you push in just a little bit more with like advice for people with children who want to set them up on a good path. So is that, I mean, tell us your thoughts on, you know, you said you don't really comment on body at all. Like, what about saying, wow, I love my arms. They help me to lift groceries into my house, or my legs help me to run. Like, is it good? Is it okay to focus on the things it does for you? What about like labeling foods? Like, I've had a tough time with, I try not to use the word healthy at all around my girls, but almost everyone else other than my husband and I use the words healthy or not. And so, you know, tell us about your thoughts on just some of the maybe principles from your experience that would, for raising children, to view their body image in a good way, and also to view food in a neutral way.
I think firstly, absolutely, the functionality of our body, explaining how amazing the body is and look at what it can do, not just from a physical point of view, but like, you know, look at how the brain works that out, or look at how, you know, your body is able to tell you what you need right now. Like, you need sleep right now, and that's what it's telling you. And that's great, isn't it? It's an amazing piece of, I don't like calling it machinery, but it's an amazing vessel, you know? And so always celebrating what your body can do is definitely something I would encourage, and helping, it helps to take away the kind of emotion to the fact that maybe your body is different to somebody else's. But I think even that is also important, is being able to explain. I think something we don't do in schools very well is helping people to appreciate that we're all different, and that's a good thing. We don't all need to look like each other, because actually that would be weird, you know? And just because somebody else has got blonde hair and you've got dark hair, that doesn't mean that you're not on the same level of them. And that's definitely something I sort of honed in with my girls, because they're mixed race. It was like, kind of, yeah, you are a bit different, but that doesn't mean that you're weird. That doesn't mean that you're not accepted. That doesn't mean that you're not good enough. That's just, this is how you are, and you're lucky, because you've got two different types of cultures that bring together, and it's kind of trying to make them see that actually it makes them really quite unique, and being unique is a positive, not a negative. I think also something that schools need to do better is this kind of is helping children not to compare. People will compare because we do, but understanding that it's almost futile because there's nobody else that's going to be like you. Even in our own families, right? Like you look at your siblings or you look at your two daughters, and they're going to be very different because even though they come from the same gene pool, the mix is different. The way in which it creates you is different. And so, I always say to my girls, like I'll always say to them that you both bring me so much joy, but for different reasons. One is just kind of is different, and the other one is different, but they're both incredible in what they do, and they both make me happy. So I think like helping children to see that there's worth in just being them for the things that they offer is really, really, really important. And then I think the other thing is kind of like we talked about earlier, removing the emotion away from body image, like helping people to realize that your body image is just that. It is just a description of the image in front of you, right? Yep. It's like I said, you're 5'2", you've got dark hair, you've got dark skin. That's it. That's all it says about you. It says nothing about how clever you are, or how kind you are, or how loving you are, or how, adventurous you are, or how courageous you are. It says nothing about you. It just is an image. And I think I wish we had more focus on that in terms of it doesn't tell you anything about that person, And when it comes to food, I mean, I've always been anti good or bad foods. Again, I don't really talk about healthy eating. I talk about having a healthy attitude towards food. And that's what we talk about a lot in our home, is having this really healthy attitude towards food, which means that nothing's off limits. And I think, in my book, Orthorexia, the way I described this healthy attitude is thinking about food almost like friends, and how you spend more time with some friends because you know that they're good for you and they provide you with some of the things that you need more. And then you might spend a little bit less time with some other friends because perhaps they're not quite as helpful all the time. And I think that can be a really nice way to teach children about food, in the same way that there are some people you're going to spend a lot of time with because you just connect and it's great. And then there are other people that you still connect with, but maybe you just don't see as much of because there's maybe not quite as much in common. But that doesn't mean you're not friends. It's just how it is. And I think explaining food in that way, that nothing's off limits, like your friends are not off limits. It's just some people you might see less of and some people you might see more of. And that's a good way of looking at food as well. I think that helps to break this whole kind of this kind of, this labeling of you must eat this and you mustn't eat that. Because you know what? There is nobody needs to get it right every day at all. Just, we're all, as long as over the balance of several weeks, you're getting the nutrients that your body needs, that's cool, because the body, again, is this amazing vessel that can cope. Like it works for us. It doesn't work against us. But yet somehow we forget that. We forget the fact that actually we have all these internal cues that tell us what we need and what we want. But because we're so obsessed with external cues and validation, we forget to listen to what's really going on inside us, which is the best way of living life.
So good. Thank you. That's really, really helpful in every level of the way you explained that. I appreciate that. And then just to wrap up here, tell us your thoughts on the long-term effects of what is going on. Like both you and I have talked about, we very much get the sense that once we quote unquote get over this or get out of this, this isn't going to be the end. Things, some semblance of what the life we knew before will be back. But what sense do you feel we'll be paying the price definitely in terms of relationships to food, just mental health aspects of what we've been through over the past over this last year, and what would you say to someone who maybe is feeling that way themselves?
So I think there's been a massive underestimation of how asking people to lock themselves up, quite literally, has had an impact on people's mental health. And sadly, I think we'll be paying the price for several years, because even now there are not enough resources, particularly in the UK, there are not enough resources for all the people that are struggling with food, depression, anxiety. Like, it's, services are overrun, and even private practices are overrun. And I think, as a professional who's been working in this field for the last year, I'm exhausted. I haven't had a break. I haven't had the normal things that I would do to restore and rebalance me. And so there's going to come a point where I'm going to have to go, I can't keep taking people on, which again then limits the number of people that can get help. And I'm one person. There are going to be lots of other people who feel exactly like I do. So, I find it very frustrating that there's been, as always, there feels to be this very reactive response to something, which I appreciate was needed because it's something we've never, ever experienced before, but without any foresight to what that's going to mean to people's general well-being. And, one thing that I didn't say earlier is that we know that when people feel isolated, or when people are isolated, and we have literally isolated people for the last 12 months, this is when your negative thoughts become more dominant.
Yeah.
And so these are the things that now need support and help. And I just hope that they do put more resources into mental health, and people can get the help that they need. And I think, like, in terms of what you can do for yourself is maybe today's conversation will just help you to understand why you've got the behaviors you've got, or why you need those coping mechanisms. And maybe some of the things we've talked about today can start as strategies to actually help yourself. Like, one thing I always hear with people who've got eating difficulties is that they don't want to make changes for themselves because they're worried that then they won't get the help that they need. And I find that so sad, because you could be waiting over 12 months at the moment in the UK to get the help that you need. And so are you going to sit there in those 12 months just suffering? Because you can do stuff yourself. I'm not saying it's easy, because it isn't. It really isn't. And in some cases, it's not possible if you're severely affected, whether that's because you're very low in weight, or because you've been overly restrictive, or because your behaviors are so ingrained you just don't know how to get out of them. I appreciate you definitely need professional help. But in some individuals, there is the ability to start thinking about things in a different way, in like some of the ways we've spoken today. Maybe you can take some of the learning points from today and start to change how you think, or make little behavioral changes. Like, that's the thing, sometimes it's difficult to change how we think. But for example, if you are somebody that is avoiding, I don't know, maybe you've got into the habit of not having breakfast for whatever reason. Maybe the first step is, I am going to have breakfast. It might not be big. It might just be a piece of fruit, or it might just be a yogurt, but I am going to have breakfast. And changing that behavior, what it does is it gives you evidence that you no longer need to hold on to that rule, right? You no longer need it, because actually I've had breakfast and it's okay. Yeah. The world hasn't fallen apart, and I don't feel dreadful. And actually it's helped me to think clearly, or it's helped me to make it through to lunch without feeling anxious because my blood sugar's dropped. Do you see what I mean? Like, maybe it's about making those little tiny behavior changes that you can do for yourself. So sadly, I think this problem is going to be ongoing for several years, and it worries me. And I don't think it's just the pandemic. I think it's also just the dependency on social media as well. Like, I think that's definitely playing into things. I'm hearing more and more about TikTok, which I don't really truly understand, if I'm honest. So don't ask me any questions on it, because I don't understand it. All I know is that it's definitely driving beliefs and behaviors in people, which creates that validation that it's not okay to eat this, or it's not okay to look like this. And so it's it's very problematic. I think this is the issue. There's so much, it's so multifactorial that I don't know if just fixing the pandemic is going to fix the problem, if that makes sense. And I think the other thing that I'm hearing a lot now is that in the UK, we are slowly starting to be allowed to come out of lockdown. And, there's this, I'm not sure they should have done it, but there's this promise that was the last lockdown, but who knows? But what I'm hearing now are people being anxious about coming out of lockdown because their body shape has changed, or they're not the same, or they're fearful of, like, there's still the threat around of, can I trust that place? Can I trust being with those people? And so I think, again, we haven't really been given the coping mechanisms or the strategies to know how to handle that. How do you come out of it now and feel okay? And, one thing I'd say to somebody if you're worried about what you look like, please remember there is so much more to you than what you look like. And most people are so in their own heads, so worried about their own problems. They're really not looking at what you're looking like. That's just your perception, but that's what they're doing. But they're really not. And you now trying to do some extreme behavior to avoid judgment, it comes back down to what we talked about earlier. People create behaviors and thoughts and beliefs to avoid fear, and avoid fear of things like judgment or criticism or rejection. But these are all perceived, like, if someone judges you, like I said, that's on them, not on you. And you are you. And that's all you have to remember, is that you are you. And every single person makes an impact on someone in some way, even if it's just because you smile at the person that you've just walked past, but you make an impact. And I think that's so much more important. That's what you'll be remembered for, not what size jeans you wear.
For sure. Yes. I thank you. That was gold, just so helpful. And you even brought in elements that we hadn't discussed yet, but I think are really, really relevant. I didn't write many notes down for things we could talk about, and didn't even, as I told you, write any questions, but we didn't even get through half of the things I considered. But this was such an important conversation. I appreciate you so much, not just for sharing with us, but your friendship as well. And I am glad the listeners got to hear a little bit about why I appreciate and love you so much. So I'm not going to tell people to go find your social media, as you and I have very similar feelings about it, and we do both take little breaks from time to time. But if you want to tell people where they can find it, then you can feel free to do that. Or if not, I will just mention your book, Orthorexia, When Healthy Eating Goes Bad. People can get themselves a copy of that if they are interested in learning more. Anything else you want to mention?
The one thing I would say, if you are somebody who's struggling with food and exercise, then do check out the Train Brave podcast, because we've got 4 series on there, and we have really tried to provide as much supportive information to help those that maybe can't access actual professional support at the moment. And, we've had really good feedback that it has helped a lot of people. So I feel very proud of what we've created.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, the Train Brave podcast is definitely a resource I would encourage you to look up.
Mm-hmm. And I'll put a link to the Train Brave website as well. Have you updated that recently?
No.
Okay. Okay. Well, I guess the podcast is the primary place to go. I will put a link to that. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you so much. And I'm sure the listeners do too. So make sure you are looking after yourself as well. We don't want that bright light of yours to burn out. So
bless you.
So
and
much.
Equally, your friendship means the world to me. Like, when I wake up and there's like messages, I get to listen to Tina's message in the morning. It always sets me up for the day. So that, that's the one benefit of the time difference, right?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. We get to hear each other's word vomit of how we're feeling. And our messages have been very, very real, raw, vulnerable sometimes it's just literally a vent or a ramble, or one of us has had a hard day and it's just spilling it all out onto the voice memo to send across. So I think people would get a kick out of listening to one of those, but I'm not going to share them because that's our
for us only.
Yes, but thank you so much. And we will bring you back for episode 4 another time soon, I'm sure.
Oh, bless you. Thank you too. Take care.
Before we end this episode, I just want to take a moment to shout out my podcast editor, Jeremy Nessel, who has done such a wonderful job of looking after my podcast, taking out all the mishaps in the episodes, while still keeping in the vulnerability and the realness and the rawness of the conversation. This is not one of those podcasts where I take out the ums and the ers and the sometimes the delay in words, because I think it's very important to keep that authenticity. We're surrounded by perfected and manicured everything, and I think it's really important that Running for Real stays that way. So thank you to Jeremy for your work. I also want to thank Maria Vargas and Amber Moore, who are also part of my team. They've been a big part of this community and me being able to build this brand. So just want to give them a shout out too. All right, let's get right back to the end of this episode. What good advice Rene has. I really appreciate her perspective, and she does so much for the community. There is a lot you can go watch on her. She's been on the BBC more times than I can count, or maybe actually not BBC, could be ITV for those of you in the UK. But one of the major channels, I don't actually know, probably both. She has been on a lot, and I have to say I feel a sense of pride whenever I'm home with my parents, and then she just appears on the TV and I'm like, hey, that's my friend. So I really hope you enjoyed getting to know her as well. And I will put lots of links in the show notes to go check out things, and also to links to her Train Brave podcast, as she mentioned there. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I just want to take a moment to thank our sponsors for this episode. So I want to thank Momentous. You can get 20% off your order at livemomentous.com. I've been talking about the Elite Sleep, the collagen, the creatine, and then I'm actually trying out Brain Drive right now, which I am enjoying. I will give a little more feedback on that once I've given it a little more time, but you can use code TINA to get 20% off at livemomentous.com. I also want to thank Insidetracker, and you can go to insidetracker.com/Tina to get 25% off the entire store. Yes, 25% off, which I'm really excited about. And I told you a little more about Insidetracker. I've been working with them for years, and I'm just excited to be sharing more about them with you currently. And yeah, go check out insidetracker.com/Tina to get 25% off. And then finally, I just want to tell you about Beam. This is a new sponsor that you'll be getting to know a bit more over the coming months. I have been trying out Beam Hydrate. That is a series of products that are going to be to help you, obviously with hydration. They have 3 types. There is performance, recovery, and balance. And they taste so good. And I mentioned that in the ad itself, but I really was shocked to see how good they taste. So you can check out Beam by going to Beam TLC. That's BEAM TLC. And you can use code TINA for 15% off your order. I'm really enjoying the Elevate or the hydration packs. But they do also have other products there if you want to check them out. But right now, my favorite things and the things I've been trying out are the Elevate hydration packs. So go to Beam TLC and use code TINA for 15% off. You can also find links to everything I've talked about today in the show notes by going to runningforreal.com/episode 240. And again, you can check out Running Realized if you haven't already. There is a new episode coming out on Monday, and I'm excited for you to check it out. So until then, my friends, have a great week.